It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 478. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Kodra.
Steel yourselves.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hello.
So, Pathfinder gets more animal options?
So very recently, and or possibly in a bit, depending on when you listen to this, Pathfinder published a book called Howl of the Wild for Pathfinder 2. And in it, they did a bunch of things that D&D has been scared to do for a long time. In particular, they printed a bunch of new ancestries in this. Some that are kind of typical, like some aquatic humanoids and actually some bug creatures.
I mean,
those are the more normal options in this book. And then you have things like merfolk and minotaurs and centaurs, which require some accommodations from your party to make work.
Yeah, I imagine so.
You shouldn't pick a merfolk if your party is going to be on land the whole time. But if it's not, then it's really cool. But also, like, if you really, really want to do this thing, there are options.
There are options. They have like one of the things that they have printed were like accessibility options, like wheelchairs and various like magical items that would let you do that. So they used those rules to create like a mobile water tank, just in case your merfolk wants to get around on land.
That actually seems like a more interesting option in the long run.
I
mean,
really
I'm here for anything that results in interesting options.
Yes,
Mhm.
like that really feels to me like the thing that
How do the townsfolk handle this person with like a giant tank on their head?
like once you've hit the basics, like go weird. And they hit the basics long ago.
They've been going weird for a while, quite frankly.
They also have, which is very exciting to me, just awakened animal. Have we missed an animal you want to be? Cool. Here's your option. You can be an awakened animal. We're going to have rules for having all sorts of natural weapons.
And like, to be honest, that's the reason why the TMNT books were the best Rift or the best Palladium books, because they just had rules to roll anything you wanted.
So yeah, in addition to Awakened Animal, which I think is very cool, and Merfolk, which I think is very cool, they also added Centaur and Minotaur. Two things which you can technically play in 5e, but in Pathfinder, they did not bother to make them medium when they made them playable options. That said, Pathfinder 2 does not inherently grant reach with size.
Okay, that would, yeah. Because that's a lot of why D&D has been scared to do that in 5e. Because mistakes were made in 3rd edition.
Sure, yes.
Mistakes were made.
And as a result, you can now play. You've been able to play a large character for a while, mostly at higher levels. There have been several ancestries which can become large, including, I believe lizard folk have an option to just become large at like level 9. But in this case, you start that way. And there are a bunch of sidebars about, hey, if you're large, these things apply to you. This is how the squeezing rules work, since you haven't actually read those at any point.
I really appreciate how Pathfinder does ancestry feats. So by default, you get one at level 1 and then every 5 levels after that. And these are just like an additional feat that are specific to your ancestry, which allows you to have all sorts of weird esoteric things in there. Do you want to be a minotaur that specializes in living in labyrinths? There is an entire way to build a character for that.
That doesn't seem particularly conducive to being an adventurer, but okay.
Maybe
you might be surprised, because like they're also one of the heritages for Minotaur, I believe, does just let you make a mini labyrinth almost anywhere, which you can at higher levels make significantly more serious. So maybe it's good that you can know how to navigate through various walls and enclosed spaces.
I love it so much. Like the leading into like weird but recognizable, because I've definitely seen games that do like more and more and more esoteric, like their own lore creatures that you can be. And like, sure, but it's and Pathfinder has definitely dabbled in that.
I was gonna say that's mostly what the previous weird things have been.
But it's really hard to feel attached to something really weird that you're not at all familiar with. It's like, okay, you're a haunted wooden construct tree spirit. Like, all right, but I don't have any context for playing that out in a way that's interesting other than like, ooh, what stats do I get? Whereas like Minotaur, Merfolk, there's tons of source material to draw from for inspiration.
So yeah, I'm excited they finally got around to these and got over their reluctance to add things like this. Some of this feels like it may have been slightly necessary to separate Minotaurs from any of their SRD stuff. Same for Centaurs and Merfolk. Like, part of me wonders if that's why we got this book or if it was pre-planned beforehand. But here we are.
I haven't read it yet. Have you actually like read through the book?
Most of it, yeah.
Does it have that? Because it was supposed to have the vibe of a David Attenborough like production.
I mean, yeah, the Minotaur is a lizard folk who is on a traveling airship, and that's the voice you get for all the writings in the book that are not the stat blocks.
Nice.
In addition to various ancestry options, that is most of the book, but well, I guess it's the first third of the book.
I'm here to say there's a couple of other options.
I mean, yes, there's a were-creature archetype in case you wanted to do that thing.
There's also, do you want to be a Disney princess and sing to the all of the creatures of the forest? And yeah, I do.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious. Like, absolutely, yes.
I want to be an animal song bard.
Yes, there are also more class options. Some feats for druids, which were kind of sorely missing for things to do in wild shape. Previously, if you wanted these, you should probably have gotten them from an archetype. Now you can get them from your class. Grafts, which is basically a magic item that is attached to you. You can get wings. Are there other magic items that let you fly? Yes, absolutely. Are they easier than literally attaching wings to you? Also, yes, absolutely. This is still awesome.
But also wings.
But also wings.
More animal companions, more creatures. Some super creatures near the end, which are the Wardens of the Wild, and a bunch of other interesting stuff in this book. I think this is definitely my favorite book in a while. Rage of Elements, the one that introduced the Kineticist, is probably gross.
Yeah, they've continued to release quite a few books, and yet most of them are quite good. Although they had kind of a lull for a bit there when like everything OGL related went very
they had to pull their entire rules team to rewrite the core rule books.
Yeah, like they just released like their first errata in like 3 years, and like the vibe I'm getting from all of the like higher ups of Paizo I follow in social media is like, yeah, we would have gotten to this earlier, but literally everyone has been working around the clock because thanks, Wizards.
Yeah, but they've still got some cool. They're still releasing cool stuff. Like,
yeah,
and I'm very excited about it. I found out that their Tianjia book came out, and I totally missed it.
Oh, did it?
I think that's not actually out yet.
No,
I've been looking to see what's going to be in it as well. Because I don't think it's out yet.
Huh. All right, well, never mind. I'm really excited about it.
Yes, I think that had to be completely rewritten to support the new rule set.
Oof.
Yes.
It is actually out though, so yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh, awesome.
Just came out very, very recently.
And then I know that I think the Starfinder 2.0 is coming soon. I will probably hear more about that at Gen Con.
I think that's a Gen... Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a Gen Con thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, like, I am fascinated. I think it is a very good move. I'm fascinated at this thing that they decided they were going to do. Apparently decided they were going to do, where the Pathfinder 2 and Starfinder 2 will be cross-compatible.
Yes.
Good.
The extent to which this is true is that what's coming out this summer is the playtest rulebook, like they did for Pathfinder 2. You actually need the Pathfinder player book and GM book in order to use it.
Yeah.
That is how cross-compatible these games are going to be.
And, like, yes, I'm here for this.
I mean, more interchangeable systems is more better.
I agree.
Well,
We're
now you
gonna-
can finally run that Star Ocean campaign.
I was about to say,
Yeah,
exactly.
we're gonna
Like-
get some weird Spelljammer stuff out of this.
Star Ocean? Spelljammer?
I mean-
No, I'm running Shadowrun, yo.
I mean, we could also do the Cosmere.
Yeah. I just yesterday agreed to DM for some folks who have found it necessary to divest themselves of their previous DM.
Okay.
And a lot of the ideas that I have for where to take things are coming out of the Cosmere, in part because that's what I've been reading lately, and in part because the person who brought this up to me is the person who got me reading Sanderson. So
I am
Yeah,
also kind of addicted at this point, so
but yeah, I'm always up for being able to cross science fiction and fantasy, to whatever degree you want in your campaign.
I did see that the 30th anniversary or 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons book is coming out. It doesn't have an edition number on it. It says it's 5e backwards compatible. Does anyone know anything about this?
I
What
may
is?
have stopped paying attention to whatever is going on with Wizards at the moment.
Fair enough.
But they are basically making a 5.5 edition,
Yeah.
but they're not changing basically anything of consequence.
Okay.
So whatever.
So why are you doing this? And the answer is
Please buy our book.
Yeah. Okay.
That is how it read to me.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how that works, I guess.
I feel bad for what sounds like a pretty miserable time over at Wizards under Hasbro.
Yes. It's like we've been here before and nobody can learn from history.
Yeah.
good player goodwill has a monetary value, and we can't stop until we've extracted all of it.
What's that? Capitalism ruins everything? I'm shocked.
And the problem, right, is they were doing really well. They just got told to squeeze.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Line must go up infinitely, though.
you can only squeeze so much, and it's a lot less than you think.
Especially now that D&D is not, and for a while has not been, the only game in town.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing that gets me, right? You can only squeeze so much, and you can only squeeze when times are good for people.
Yeah.
So if you squeeze when people are feeling squeezed, they are going to leave you. Capitalists, take note. If you see your line start to stop going up, everybody else's line is probably going down. All the people that you need to make your line go up.
Yep.
And it baffles me how much this seems to be missed.
Well, and there's this fallacy that there are infinitely new, markets to explore.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but I feel like probably D&D has reached maximum saturation.
We're probably at the point where everybody who might be interested in it has heard of it, knows about it, has either played or not.
Well, I would say I'm going to go out on a limb and say there are people who know about Dungeons and Dragons who who are at least somewhat curious about Dungeons and Dragons, who have never played Dungeons and Dragons because there is an onboarding problem there.
That is true.
Right. But I think the challenge is while they're adding technically new people in the front door, they're also losing people out the back door.
Well, but more importantly, they're not doing a good enough job at solving that onboarding problem.
Yeah.
Especially on the DM side.
Yes.
Yeah, if it's hello, I have an MBA. You want to put me in front of I need to solve D&D is losing people. I can tell you where you do it. You figure out how to solve DMing is hard as a problem.
Yep. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If you make, I've been DMing for 20 years. Why do I DM Pathfinder 2 as much as I do? Is it because I especially love Pathfinder? No, I'm an on-record hater of the original Pathfinder. Am I interested in their world? No. I mostly think their world is a sort of iffy pastiche. I don't run in the official Pathfinder world because I mostly think it's dumb.
It is definitely a grab bag of everything.
I had honestly forgotten that there was an official Pathfinder world.
There is an official Pathfinder world, and like
it's huge. It encompasses basically everything, including space travel.
Yeah, it's.
Can you think of it? It's probably in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's like a 12-year. Like at a high level, it is a 12-year-old's idea of everything they think is cool in one place.
Yes.
Like,
to be fair, most of their adventures were set in the Inner Sea region, much like most of D&D stuff is set in the Sword Coast.
Yeah.
Sort of, but things are set in like a specific region because they want to explore that specific vibe.
They have gotten better at that, yes.
They have gotten a lot better. They have not always been this good, but they have gotten a lot better at making sure that your adventures are mostly taking place in a fairly contained part of their overworld so that you get away from this is a big weird pastiche thing.
Mm-hmm.
While admittedly still giving players who are like, but I want to play a gunslinger in this swords and sorcery high fantasy, the like angle with which they can at least slightly justify it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a place that you've come from. It's way over there. It's fine.
I'm from Alkenstar, and now I'm in the Mwangi jungle.
And like individually, they've done some really cool stuff with their locations. Like, don't get me wrong. When you actually, like I say, at a high level, it's like a 12-year-old's conception of things that are cool. It is. But as soon as you zoom in, they actually get really cool and thoughtful in a way that I really haven't seen anywhere else. But
yeah, and the other thing I see happening with Wizards is Magic, where they successfully did something that I think a lot of players really wanted, which is allow you to easily play the game online. And that was extremely successful, and everyone took that as a sign to exploit those people so much harder.
Mm.
Oh, I don't think that's why Magic has stumbled.
I mean,
what?
I think their crossovers have been a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah. I think the crossovers have been a bit of a mixed bag and way too much.
Well, that all happened after Magic Arena came out, and then there were some reports that Wizards and Magic were the only profitable thing that Hasbro had, and after that, Universes Beyond became a big thing, and the product releases ramped up dramatically, and now everyone is just exhausted with Magic.
Yeah, Magic's a similar problem, but anyway, because I was mid thought.
Back to the DM thing.
Sorry.
Yeah, like the reason I DM PF2 is not because I like most of the unique things that PF2 does. It's because it is the easiest system to DM by a huge margin.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like you can, like as a DM, I need to do a certain amount of math to know whether or not I'm going to send my players into an encounter that is going to be the correct challenge level for them. Good luck doing this in a tabletop RPG.
Mm-hmm.
Like it almost doesn't matter. Like pick a tabletop RPG, and if it even attempts to provide this to you, which most of them don't, but if it even attempts to provide this to you, it's probably bad. Except for Pathfinder 2, which is excellent. Like so excellent that there is an app that you can hit a button and randomly generate an encounter, and that encounter is good.
I'm going to at least mention Kobold Fight Club here, although Kobold Fight Club uses 5e's challenge rating math as though it were actually correct, so it has some problems.
Yeah, I mean, I use Mimic Fight Club, which is the PF2 version, and it's dramatically better than Kobold Fight Club, mostly because it's based on underlying math that actually works.
Yes.
And like we were talking about Fallout and last week, and I was talking about how I was working on a Fallout game, like a Fallout tabletop RPG, and like, the book it provides absolutely zero guidance about how to put together an encounter at all.
Yeah, we've been looking at various systems for one shots, and yeah, most of them don't give you much to go on.
Yeah, there's like
if anything.
If anything, and that's so crucial to the DM experience. Like the Dungeon Master's Guide in so many games is like extra stuff for your players and more systems complexity.
Yeah.
But that's not what you need. That is not DM onboarding. It is not a guide. It is the advanced Dungeon Master's Handbook, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to publish, in the same way that the Advanced Player's Guide is generally a perfectly reasonable thing to publish. But it's not your core.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody has really... There is this like mystique of the overworked DM, where like DMs themselves brag about how much work they put into their campaigns. I like that mythology is just not helping people get into it. Like if you wanted a bunch more people to get into and play D&D, you make a bunch of DMs.
Let me tell you how much not work it is to make a Lancer encounter.
Yeah.
I haven't yet made Lancer encounters. It sounds like they're reasonable.
They're pretty reasonable.
Yeah, like that's great.
Well, also because most of the NPCs are roughly equivalent strength.
Yeah.
And like if you want to make one better, you just make it an elite and it gets 2 health bars. And that's cool.
Or you start to take some and put them at the higher difficulty, which is marked out there. Like here's how you take it from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3.
That's supposed to be a thing that goes along with license level, but I did that to you guys early because you guys were blowing through things.
I feel like Lancer definitely has more of a like party composition matters thing.
That's a separate thing, and yeah, it totally does.
But yeah, I mean, the thing I would not do if I were trying to make more money out of D&D is try to get the people who are already giving me money, make the people who are already giving me money mad. I also wish, like, this is possibly me being elitist, but I wish that, like, professionally written adventures were better.
Yeah.
Like, I think the very best ones that anybody makes are Paizo and Lancer.
So there's definitely a challenge, I think, even with Paizo, and Lancer's less of this, but like for us, we need to have a much different level up and experience curve than is part of like the core rules. Because by like the core rules, you level up after like 16 hours of play. And that's not really reasonable.
And this is that's sort of what I'm getting at, is like a well-written adventure would have pacing options, would have adaptations for different groups, would have like those are the first things I would think of.
Yeah, you should probably have like figure out like how do you incorporate content, like optional content that is skippable, like. Because that's the other thing is I find too much of them are kind of high on the chaff, the in between stuff that doesn't matter enough. If the in between stuff mattered more, that'd be one thing.
I mean, alternately, hey, this is a campaign that is intended to. I need fewer campaigns that are. This is a campaign intended for your sessions to be 4 hours long and to be complete after 250 of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, no. Nobody, like, I don't actually want that.
This is designed for 1 hour sessions.
Like, nobody, I wanted, like, I accept that, like, there's absolutely a market for that, but they're not the people with money.
I was about to say, we did those campaigns in college.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's great when you can devote, like, an entire weekend to nothing but D&D.
This is an adventure path written for people in their 30s with jobs. I would buy it. I don't even care what the system is. I would buy it.
I mean, because you almost need a module system that is a number of 30-minute to an hour long chunks, and you can string as many of them together as you can.
Yeah. And then you just pick up where you left off. This
is why I do like the Lancer model of like, 2 to 3 combats, level up.
Yep.
Like you go out on a mission, you finish the mission, level up.
Because the other thing is, if you have a group of people, especially a DM, who can sit down and be like, yeah, I'm going to play 254-hour sessions to complete this thing, they can write their own campaign. They have the time. I do think D&D has dabbled with that, but awkwardly.
So, Animal Well, you completed that, Kodra?
I did. This game was very fun. It's not too long. It definitely feels different than a lot of people are calling it a Metroidvania and then arguing about whether it's a Metroidvania and then arguing about the term Metroidvania, as is the lot of online discourse.
Sure.
It's very puzzle oriented. Like, it's a puzzle platformer game where you get items that allow you to move in interesting ways that are designed to help you solve puzzles. You can use those items in creative ways to sequence break the game. It kind of feels Metroid. You don't technically fight anything. The closest you get is you can throw a tiny firecracker that causes the ghosts in the well to disappear. It's also got, like, I feel like when I finished Hollow Knight for the first time, I didn't really understand the story, but I knew a story happened. When I finished this game for the first time, I was like, huh, did a story happen? It felt very like old school NES, in the sense that there was a game here. There was a bunch of cool obstacles. I completed those obstacles, and now the game is rolling credits. I guess I won. And also, apparently, there's a whole bunch more to this game. Like, I guess there was a whole ARG around it. I don't think I'm going to go into that. But if you like puzzle platformer games, if you like exploration, its map system is pretty good. It lets you easily find out, like, where you are and where you've been, and lets you take notes on the map after you get a certain amount of unlocks. But yeah, I had a really good time with it. The ending is got a boss fight that is just a platforming boss, and it's quite scary. They've got good spooky music. Also, the game is 33 megabytes large.
Yeah, it looks like
Wow.
it's real. I don't know. I don't know what to explain. Like, it's a specific vibe that it's going for, and it's kind of a low
Order
tech
of
vibe.
magnitude smaller than I would have expected.
Yeah,
At least.
Like, it is 100 megabytes on when you get it on PlayStation, but that's because the high res image that they have to include is larger than the entire game.
Yep.
That's really funny.
Like, this is the work of one person who did built their own engine and decided to make this game.
Love it.
But yeah, it's like, this game feels like it was going for like what you remembered NES games being like, and it's definitely way better than an NES game would be. Like, boy, is the movement feel great. But yeah, it's really fun. I highly recommend.
I've seen a lot of pictures of the room with 2 capybaras in it.
I don't actually know if I've found the room with 2 capybaras in it. That must be a secret.
Yeah, it's like a fountain with 2 capybaras in it.
Maybe. I'll have to go and take a look for this, because I don't remember seeing a room with 2 capybaras. But there are a lot of animals. But unlike most animals in video games, these are actual animals. They don't talk. So it's not like they can give you a story. They're just chilling. So mostly they're a bunch of squirrels that are running away from you. And this is like acting as the like character to show you, hey, you're in a new area. Maybe you should follow the squirrel. And if you follow the squirrel, you'll find like a reasonable path to take. It's the hornet mechanic. But also, like, you have to fight, you quote unquote fight like all of these creatures, but you don't have any like actual combat, so you're mostly just like avoiding them. The only creatures you can do any harm to are the ghosts, and that's only with firecrackers. And all you can do is make them like disappear for a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, I've just seen a lot of this showing up in my Mastodon feed.
Yeah, it's very good. Apparently, Kevin Regame from Power Up Audio became obsessed with this game and like got credited as the super tester because apparently he's been just playing it in testing for a long time now. And so that's how I found out about it. Because he's the guy, he does a lot of work on Celeste stuff.
Okay.
And he's kind of the Tommy Tallarico of our era, and hopefully won't become terribly problematic like Tommy Tallarico.
Yeah, hopefully not awful.
The last like 30 seconds have made me feel so old because there have been like 5 proper nouns dropped and I don't know any of them.
I'm pretty sure I'm older than you.
That's what makes me feel old.
Get used to it.
It happens. Like that all started with me when I started working in the same office as Ray. When Ray got super into League, or more specifically the LCS, and would have random conversations in the office, I had no clue what any of it was.
I had somebody in my office today let me know that I had the best drip of anybody in the studio. And that he hopes that when he's old too, he's just as stylish. It's like, God.
Excuse me while I turn to dust.
My son has told me as he's playing games that actually I'm 6 and he's 39 and about to die.
Wow.
They're so like blasé, obsessed with death at that age, and it's disconcerting sometimes.
I went through a whole phase where I was really obsessed with things that were lethal, specifically chemicals that were lethal.
Well, we're reading through the What If book right now, and that's not helping things. What if you made a table out of a periodic table out of the periodic table of elements? No, don't do this. There are elements on there that do not want to exist.
They may or may not be uncomfortable with existing.
Like some of don't want to exist sometimes violently.
Yeah.
Well, like there's some things on the table that have only like been observed for very, very, very short periods of time.
Yes.
Oh yeah, most of those really high numbers, like they have been created in a laboratory for a time measured in fragments of a second,
and then they stop existing violently.
So, Raid Simulator. What is this thing that I have heard of several times?
I put it on the topic list as Raid Simulator, but the proper name is Rabbit and Spell.
Rabbit and Steel.
Okay.
Rabbit and Steel, that one.
Okay.
Sorry. The previous game from this creator is called Maiden and Spell.
Yes.
Got it.
This is Rabbit and Steel.
All right, a title that describes exactly what the game is.
That you are playing a rabbit, and some of those have
We're
some
halfway there.
steel.
All right. See, I would have expected like giant mecha rabbits or something. But in any case,
This is a game
Correct.
created because somebody thinks raiding in MMOs is really cool, but realizes that, the entire process of gearing up and trying to find 7 other players is kind of a pain. So they made this game, which is very heavily inspired by Final Fantasy XIV
Okay.
and provides a simplified style of like hotbar MMO combat and asks you to dodge.
What if I could play Final Fantasy XIV, but instead of having 36 buttons to press, I have 4, and the gear actually matters? Sign me up. The slight. I mean, upside, downside. Decide what you want. You are kind of playing a bullet hell game. But
So you're raiding.
So you're raiding,
Yeah.
exactly.
You're raiding in FF14.
like that one fight in Trial of the Crusader fit in so well, just for reasons.
FF14 had an Ikaruga fight already, didn't it? I just don't remember what it was.
It's one of...
I mean, Tsukiyomi has the whole light and dark mechanic.
There's
I don't
that.
remember if you get... I don't remember if there's absorbing
I thought the
attacks.
Near Raid had something like that in it too.
That
The
seems
Near Raid has
likely.
a lot of miscellaneous bullet hell in it. but nothing similar to that.
But yeah, you go through up to like there's like it's a roguelike as well. So if you lose, you restart your run. And you lose like any of the gear or upgrades you've gotten to your character. And so like every run you start with 5 available classes, and I think you can unlock up to 10 total classes.
I believe that's correct.
The classes all feel pretty different from each other, but ultimately everyone is trying to answer the question, how do I not stand in these Venn diagrams?
The good news is if you stand in a Venn diagram in this game, you only lose 1 point. You only take one hit rather than the many you can take in FF14 proper if you get Venn diagrammed.
You can play with 1 to 4 players, and it scales very well accordingly. I would say the
most really impressive.
Yeah, I would say like from 1 to 2 is the most different because they have different mechanics for multiplayer versus single player, which does mean that sometimes you're like, I think Ash, your least favorite fight is one that is kind of we thought was trivial in multiplayer because it's a completely different feeling to it.
Yeah, 2 of my least favorite fights in single player are much, much easier in multiplayer.
Because, like, instead of having a fixed point you have to run away from, you just have to be far enough away from your allies. And your allies can help you with that.
So yeah, I've been kind of obsessed with this game. Unlocked most of the classes at this point. I think I have 1 to go.
I have been playing this not as obsessively. I've unlocked 1 class. I have only managed to beat it in multiplayer with Ash's help. But it's really fun in multiplayer. And you have to do raid calls.
I've been down a different rabbit hole and have probably, because I've only played it like twice, probably fallen behind enough that I can no longer hack it. Much like raiding. Because I'm down a completely different rabbit hole, which we'll get to, but what I've played was a lot of fun.
There was a world first raid race. Which is beating the game on the final difficulty. Watching that is hilarious, and like the crossover between people who race in Final Fantasy XIV in this game, it's definitely a Venn diagram. There's a lot of overlap.
Much like what you're going to get hit by.
Yeah. I do like the comment on one of the top reviews on Steam is raiders getting worked by bullet hell and shmup players getting worked by mechanics. It's perfectly balanced. I do think there are very satisfying moments where it's like we're both getting pulsating like spheres around us that says like if anyone else is in our sphere. So this is a classy thing. Like everything comes with a textual warning of what you're supposed to do. Like the game is doing raid calls for you. Like if you're supposed to spread apart, they'll say spread out over your character. Like get in a line means you want to like get in a horizontal line with the other players. Like get in, you need to get in. There are some that are a little harder, like this is a beam that's going to rotate this direction. You probably need to get below it. But it does like, everyone has a defensive ability as well, which has a usually 15-second cooldown that gives you like 1 to 2 seconds of invulnerability.
Yeah. Some classes are more privileged than others in this particular respect. The monk-like class has like a dash, which the invincibility period is shorter, but it lets you cover a whole lot of ground, so it's very useful for getting out of things. And then there's the Dark Knight, or the Heavy Blade, as it were, which just has like 2 full seconds of invulnerability field, which you can put wherever you want.
Yup. So theoretically, if you want, you can protect your whole party.
I mean, one person is like, I'm out. And the other person is like, I'm not moving, and you can't make me.
Yeah, for exactly those times.
I love the Heavy Blade. They have big melee attacks that they have like a ranged attack that buffs their dash, their charge, and their big melee. And then they have like a big charge and a big melee. and then just a circle of a no. It's a fun class.
And my favorite classes so far are the Druid, one of the classes you start with, and the Brawler, which is, I think, the third class I unlocked, second class I unlocked, something like that. Close behind is the Spellblade, which is definitely the first class that you're going to unlock.
I unlocked Sniper first.
Yeah, okay, right. I guess Brawler was third. Sniper was cool. I just didn't like it as much as the classes I already had unlocked.
I love Sniper. It's probably my favorite class right now.
So yeah, this game also has a free demo, so you can play it without having to, pay any money if you wish, and it plays excellently on Steam Deck.
It is very fun to play because we've gotten to do this in person, like at a table with Steam Decks.
That's wild.
I kind of like, there's no plans for it. I would love to see this on like a Switch with couch co-op.
This does support local co-op on like a PC if you have like a controller and keyboard and mouse. But I don't think there are any plans to bring this to consoles, but there really should be.
So I know that Maiden and Spell eventually made it to console. But maybe it's more expected for fighting games to come to consoles.
No idea.
I don't know. That game looks interesting, and I might have to pick it up, but it also scares me.
What, you don't want to play a bullet hell PvP game?
A bullet hell fighting game.
There are many of these now.
Are there?
Yes.
I'm really curious if there's going to be more of these now, because this is really fun.
I mean, it kind of feels like this could be a path in which the AFK game genre could move to where you're controlling a group of autonomous minions.
So I don't know much. Go ahead.
Sorry, it has been pointed out that there are other raid simulator type games where you play as a healer or a tank.
Yes.
But this one is not entirely trying to simulate the experience of
MMO raiding.
MMO raiding so much as just the mechanics of fighting in a raid encounter.
Okay.
And specifically Final Fantasy XIV.
Yes. Specifically that.
We want to make sure that you know what is going to be coming at your face with as many indicators as possible, and then the thing will happen and you'll feel bad because you took a hit. It's it was incredibly fair. It told you what it was gonna do. There's also a bit of there are definitely not every attack happens the same way, but there are sequences of attacks. There's also there is in fact a council fight, which I find hilarious. The church mouse is very scary. It's one of my least bosses I'm least effective at. And
I feel that's very character dependent for me, whether I have an easy time or a hard time on that fight.
I guess that's fair. If you have enough AoE to bring the whole council down, you're in probably better shape.
Yeah, that's definitely my approach with that fight.
But yeah, very fun game.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's definitely the first game of a shmup genre I've really sunk into.
So this past Tuesday was the beginning of season 4 of Diablo IV, and that game has been in a not great state for a bit and has kind of improved a few times and then had not amazing seasons. But I wanted to see what quote unquote Loot Reborn was, which is they're touting a whole bunch of changes. The game's in a pretty good spot right now. It's it feels like someone on the team lost their standing in determining what type of game it was going to be. That's the only way I could really describe it, because it now feels far more like a Diablo game. It is very Diablo 3-ish at times. The pacing and the way combat feels when you're rolling through things is way more Diablo 3 than it was Diablo 4-ish up to this point. The leveling curve has been sped up considerably because they decided, I guess, that they want to actually put content in at the end of the game and have some shot of players actually seeing that content. Because there was this problem that had happened in Diablo 4 where, you've got multiple world tiers, and you can start in either World Tier 1 or World Tier 2 at the beginning of the game. And then somewhere around 40 or 50, depending upon your gear and class and skill, you're going to do a dungeon, which will unlock World Tier 3. And that point should be a inflection point where the game feels more enjoyable because you're, opening up more things that you can do. But in reality, it just kind of felt like the game got slower and a little bit more grindy once you moved into World Tier 3. And then there was another point where around 60 to 70-ish, you did the same thing, but to transition into World Tier 4. And the game slowed down again and got a little bit more plodding. And all of that friction has been removed. So, you can roll into World Tier 3. It feels like the game picks up in density and speed, and then roll into World Tier 4, and it feels like it again picks up in density and speed and things for you to do. What were you going to say, Kodra?
I was going to ask, so is the problem that the rewards for World Tier 3 didn't feel good? Like, was there an option where you could be like, no, I don't actually want to go to World Tier 3? Or was it like getting cursed by Kitava?
So the problem is there's, okay, so when you enter World Tier 3, it opens up a new tier of gear called Sacred.
Okay.
Sacred is like the difference between greens in old school World of Warcraft and greens in Burning Crusade.
Oh, okay.
So like you go from having probably some legendaries before you make that transition to immediately throwing away everything that you had previously and putting on some sacred gear. And then the same thing happens again.
Validated. Yeah, got it.
The same thing happens again when you transition from World Tier 3 to 4. You basically just quickly throw away everything you can. So no gear matters until you're in World Tier 4. Like really, at the end of the day, like it just does not matter until you have made it past 70-ish. So like it feels awkward. I mean, to be fair, that's kind of what happens in a game like PoE, is your gear doesn't matter until you've graduated into the end game. But it's much more clear about how you should be playing. Like you're just leveling through the campaign at that point. And once you exit the campaign, you can do in-game stuff, and around 70, your gear should start to matter. But, Diablo 4 prior to this, it was awkward because like the amount of effort required, like last season, I didn't even get to World Tier 3. I gave up before then because it just didn't feel fun. Like it was too plodding to get there. It was just too much grinding.
The time it took to get there was too long?
Yeah. I played, I don't know, I probably played 60 hours last season, and I made it to, I think, level 46. And I wasn't like grinding as the most efficient player ever, but also 60 hours to get less than half the way through the leveling process seems like a lot.
Yeah,
whereas
that does not sound like a game I want to play.
Whereas this time around, I was like 60 by the first evening, and I was playing super chill, and also like stopped doing what I was doing to pop into Guild Wars 2 and do dailies, and so like I put in far less hours, and I got basically halfway through the campaign in a single, or through the leveling process in a single evening. And the one season that felt amazing was the season where they added a mechanic that was always up, and it was this super dense content that collectively got referred to as the Blood Tide, because there's a thing that used to show up in World Tier 3 and 4 called the Hell Tide, which was like supposed to be a challenging area to go hunting in, and you could level in it and you could get gear, but it was only up like every 2 hours or something like that. Whereas Blood Tide was up all the time. Like when it left a zone, it immediately transitioned to another zone and you could just keep rolling. And there were quests in it, and there was this whole threat mechanic that as you succeeded in that area, you built up more animosity with the vampires, and then eventually they would start to hunt you, so the density would ramp up even further until you finally get attacked by a boss that would spawn after a period of time. And so that felt great. And I think I made it to level 90 in that season, and I am not sure I ever did any of the content I was supposed to do. I just did the Blood Tide content, and it was a lot of fun. So what they've done is they've redesigned how the Helltide works, and now it's available at level 1, and it is this super dense content that largely works the same way that the Blood Tide did, and you can just skip leveling any other way and just do Blood Tide or the Helltide, and it feels great. Or, once you unlock Nightmare Dungeons, you can do those as well. But everything has been sped up, and mob density has increased, and your ability to kill has been smoothed out. So you can really just kind of hop in and rip through whatever you want to rip through, and it feels really good and really fluid. And it is the most efficient way is to go into the Helltide and group up with other players and do lots of content. But you could also sort of just casually do either that or dungeons or open world area content, and it feels great. And the gearing feels quite a bit smoother. For the most part, the other thing that kind of sucked previously about the game is its build system is part talent tree, part gear, and your legendary items are basically build enabling items, so that you need a specific thing to be able to get your build off the ground. And unfortunately, previously, there was this whole system of extracting these legendary aspects from gear. And you would have to store this in either your bank or a very, very, very limited storage tab. I think you could only store 20 of them at a time. But as you got better gear, you had to keep finding another piece of gear with the aspect that you needed on it so that you could extract it and turn it into the item that you actually need in that slot. And it was real awkward. And some of the items could be learned from dungeons and applied over and over and over. But the versions that you got from dungeons that you could apply over and over and over were the lowest possible rank of that ability. So it was just a bad option. And as a result, you ended up with 5 tabs worth of legendary gear that you were just holding on to in case you got an upgrade so that you could extract the thing you needed from the item and turn the new item into the piece of gear that you needed. So it was infuriating. What they've done instead is they've taken the Codex of Power system, which was the things you learned in dungeons. But now, as you salvage legendary gear, you learn the aspects that you're salvaging. And as you find perfect versions of it, you learn the ability to apply the perfect version. So over time, your the patterns that you get better as you extract more stuff. So like that feels great too, because it feels like, okay, me going out into the world, killing stuff, getting drops, and then salvaging it is slowly building up my recipe book of patterns that I can then use to craft the legendary that I actually need. So like there's just a bunch of quality of life improvements and a bunch of tweaks to the way gameplay feels that, like, it's not the most brilliant ARPG ever. It is kind of like a prettier version of Diablo 3, but I enjoyed Diablo 3. I had a lot of fun playing it. It is, you know, a perfectly cromulent ARPG seasonal experience. And I think maybe now that they've kind of landed on something that people are enjoying a year after the fact, maybe they can now actually start to focus on making compelling content for people to play once they finish the leveling journey. But like, I think they were in this bad position where the game that they originally released just wasn't fun and people didn't like it. And now they've had to rethink almost every single system.
I feel like I would have more sympathy if they hadn't just done this. I mean, not just, but like, they did this with Diablo 3.
Yes, they did.
Right. They went through all of this with Diablo 3. And I feel like someone didn't learn any lessons from Diablo 3. In fact, I feel like there was probably a mantra inside of Blizzard that anytime anybody mentioned Diablo 3, they were shunned for doing so because Diablo 3 was considered a failure because it didn't make any money.
So my takeaway, and maybe this is going to, like, I think that they were trying to reach an audience beyond ARPG players because ARPG as an audience doesn't support a Blizzard budgeted item like Diablo.
Yeah, I mean,
This is probably correct.
I feel like that is absolutely correct, but also those people are going to play the game once.
I totally get what you are saying. But like this is the thing, is like Blizzard's like, well, we made Diablo. We are the Diablo company. We obviously have to make more Diablo. And like, I don't know, maybe scale back the budget if you're going to do that. Like, maybe don't go in expecting this to be like do numbers that are just frankly unrealistic for the audience.
Yeah, but they invented the genre. Clearly, they have to have the best one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no lessons were learned.
Budget? What? Who does that?
I feel like this is one of those cases where games probably could use a little bit more biz dev.
I got news for you. Unfortunately, it's not the biz dev part that's the problem. It's not the biz dev part that's going to solve that problem.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like there was a vision. The vision was just incompatible with what someone actually wants for the long run in an ARPG.
And unfortunately, like, I struggle because I feel like the term ARPG is both a magnet for some players, but also a like closed door for others.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you are marketing yourself as like ARPG, that's a decision.
You have made a promise to a certain group of players as to what that means. And they're going to be the very vocal players.
Yeah, but quite frankly, there aren't that many of them. So if your game is good enough, and your marketing is good enough, that's the other problem.
More games
you can pull in other players.
More games
they did. They just didn't stick around.
Yeah, more games need to figure out how to Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2, very confusing for me for a while because I was like, this game's awesome. Why have I never played a game like this? Because Helldivers 2 is completely different than Helldivers 1. Like, totally different genre.
Yep.
Like, if you wanted to make a Diablo MMO, like, make the Diablo MMO, call it Diablo 4, but make it clear that's what you're doing.
Right.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of classic, so to speak, game genres that are struggling to have a meaningful identity because, like, the things that make them the things that give them an identity to the players that are really into them are not, I want to say not meaningful. They are meaningful in the sense that they contribute to that identity, but they're not like core design elements. Like, I don't think that you can cogently convince ARPG players that Borderlands is an ARPG. But the only reason you can't is because it's got the wrong camera angle. Everything else about it is an ARPG.
Yeah, and it got called Diablo with guns when it came out a whole lot. The first one, anyway. By the second one, it was its own thing. Like, we had looter shooter as a genre by that point.
Yeah, and like MMOs have a similar problem where like, what is the thing that differentiates an MMO from, any other game that saves your character? Like, it's a tough question to answer because it's mostly not cosmetic stuff. Is Helldivers 2 an MMO? It certainly is leaning into the massive part more than most things that you would call an MMO.
Kill the unsigned int maximum of a 32-bit integer worth of enemies.
But I also don't think that, and it's got it's got a multiple tiered progression system, and it's got a currency, it's got shops, it's got shops of different types of currencies, it's got leveling up.
It's got a living story.
It's got a living story, but I think that it would be a hard sell to convince, an MMO enthusiast that Helldivers 2 is an MMO. And it's like, what is the thing that's missing from it? And possibly, much like looter shooter, much like extraction shooter, etc., we're like on the cusp of having a whole bunch of new genre definitions kind of arise, because like things like ARPG or MMO or, adventure game, strategy game, like don't mean much anymore.
Well, okay, so there's a challenge there because they mean a specific thing to a specific demographic.
I guess they don't mean anything. They are not defined well enough that you can write a list of requirements and build a piece of software around them.
See, I feel like ARPG is. Like, it has a very specific definition to me at this point.
The definition break down if you allowed WASD control.
I mean, if you're saying ARPG as a genre, it means a specific thing. Action role-playing game as just a concept.
Again, when you say that, I still think Kingdom Hearts. When you say that out loud, that is the game that comes to mind to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an action role-playing game. So is Fable.
Also,
once upon a time, action RPG meant Kingdom Hearts and Fable, and isometric action RPG meant
or
Diablo.
dungeon crawler, which is also a different genre of games encompassing things like Etrian Odyssey and Wizardry.
Right.
So that term has its own problems.
But isometric action, it's one of the reasons why I get really heated about ARPG as a definition, because it's missing, because ARPG, by its name, should include Diablo, but it doesn't, because it's not isometric. That isometric camera is the important thing.
Right. It is.
But you're not including it in the name to differentiate. It's not included as a differentiator.
I mean, I didn't name the genre. I'm just saying it is now a thing. And it means a specific thing.
But also, I think that that's what I mean about we're on the cusp of new genre definitions where you can have, we came up with the concept of a looter shooter because we made an ARPG that was a first-person shooter.
Yep.
Like that became necessary. And I think that you can have a bunch of genre experimentation that take a bunch of the like really compelling core loops of a game like Diablo or a game like Path of Exile or Last Epoch, but that on the surface don't look anything like them. And I think at that point it becomes important to then redefine certain genres. I mean, adventure games used to mean you pointed and clicked with icons. And then we came up with other stuff and they retroactively became point and click adventure games.
Well, and before that, it used to mean you typed words into a parser.
Yeah.
You are in danger of being eaten by a guru.
Yes.
I do think for me, though, the thing that most importantly defines the feeling of an ARPG is actually your interaction with loot / randomly generated objects that you put into an inventory and the way that influences your character.
Yeah.
Because
like Borderlands.
But no, I absolutely agree. Borderlands is an ARPG for me. Well,
Borderlands isn't for me just because there's not as, I don't know, it doesn't feel like there's as much depth of build in Borderlands.
There sure was in Borderlands too. More than some ARPGs in this genre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that. Like Borderlands 1 just felt like it hadn't fully figured out how to do its loot system. It was an ARPG with a not like fully fleshed out loot system. But like as soon as like the other thing that I think holds Borderlands at least back for me is the lack of like a luck manipulation crafting system for loot.
Well, for me, it's the fact that I only play Borderlands once.
I mean, if you were to tell me that Destiny was an ARPG, I would probably support your notion there. Because like it had all of the elements that Kodra's talking about.
I don't actually know enough about Destiny's loot system to say one way or another how I feel about that statement.
It is. It's
it was very much.
It's pretty.
Destiny was
to
probably the less controversial version of this for me, because also much like what Ash was saying, it's sort of built for you to play. It's sort of built for you to play generative stuff over and over, not really, not a fixed map the way Borderlands is.
I mean, and I think that's the problem that Diablo IV had, was it had a really good campaign, but it did not have anything close to a cogent mechanical loop that you would want to do over and over and over. And is just now starting to get there.
I rarely play an ARPG more than once. But it's one of the reasons I keep on mentioning MMOs is because it feels like, much like MMOs, they're trying to be a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Well, and I think yes and no, but also I think that there's another problem happening where there's a lot of folks that are trying to grow the genre in different directions, and there's a significant amount of pushback over that, where like folks want a thing and they want multiple copies of that thing because any given season really only buys you a limited amount of time. So it would be nice if you had multiples to play, but there's only so many of these. Like there's Last Epoch and Path of Exile and Diablo 4 and now maybe Diablo or Diablo 3, maybe Diablo 4.
Ghost Lore was pretty good, although Ghost Lore was definitely a play once type of game.
It was a play once experience.
I feel, Bell, like if somebody built 4 Diablo 4s in parallel so that they were functionally the same game, but like the details were different in each one, you'd be thrilled. Like it's the same game under the hood, but it's different classes, different areas, different loot in each one.
I mean, I would play every Last Epoch like game that comes onto the market. Whereas like it's Last Epoch is a twist on Diablo 3 and Path of Exile, and I would be happy to play all of them.
Yeah. I don't know what you do. It's tough because I don't know what you do when you hit like long-standing MMOs also run into this problem where it's like you've got a devoted player base, but that devoted player base basically just wants more of the same forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But you continually lose people. Slowly, but you do lose people over time doing that. Like it's not sustainable. And like, I mean, that was the big problem with point and click adventure games is like they were catering really hard to like a certain group of people that were their most devoted fans who wanted like the most obtuse imaginable puzzles plus, no really major changes in the genre. And it just wasn't sustainable. I don't know how you solved that problem.
I mean, adventure games solved it in 2 ways. One, Telltale made a few games.
Yeah, episodic gaming became a thing.
And 2, Home Alone became a thing. Or not Home Alone.
Home Alone. What?
Gone Home.
Gone Home. Well, yeah. And that's the interesting thing is that adventure games
the
died.
so-called walking simulator.
Yeah, adventure games totally died, and some new games came out with the same like ethos, but weren't the same type of game at all.
Right.
Well, I mean, the CRPG died until games like Fallout changed the genre entirely.
Yeah.
Like those are only starting to come back because Larian has done a ridiculous. Larian and Owlcat have basically done a ridiculous amount of work.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and Bethesda.
I meant in that style.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is that like the Bethesda style of game took over what those games used to be, and like
Yes.
BioWare style in the same way.
I feel like in order to make that work, you have to be willing to admit that you were changing the game. That it is no longer going to be the game that people thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
You can't play both sides. And I think that's the problem with like a Diablo 4 is they would sit there and tell folks that this is a callback to Diablo 2 and it's our Diablo roots and like it's the Diablo that you're used to.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't. It was trying to do a thing. And realistically, it was trying to do, like I hate to say ARPG as Souls-like, but I think that's the direction that they were originally going, and they had to kind of half-ass their way back on that vision. Because like originally everything was about how hardcore the world was and how difficult combat was and how,
which is a fundamental misunderstanding of Souls-likes in the first place, but
I mean, certainly there's a lot of that too.
Just because you die in 3 hits does not mean your game is a Souls-like.
Well, it's the same problem that New World had, where they started out with one vision and realized that vision didn't have enough of an audience and started mutating it to try and loop in more people into the ship.
In fact, nobody wants all the time PvP.
People say it all the time, but yeah, we've been here. We've been down this road a few times now.
I mean, had Diablo 4 had a clear vision that it was trying to do a specific thing and really leaning into it and been honest about the thing that it was trying to do, it might have been a different experience.
I will say, so, because we were talking about it, when I was a kid, I played all of the, I played Sam & Max Hit the Road, and I played Day of the Tentacle 2, or Day of the Tentacle, Maniac Mansion 2. And so I thought I liked point-and-click adventure games.
You liked LucasArts adventure games.
And so then, sometime in the early 2000s, I played Dreamfall, and I was like, oh yeah, I really like this. And then I was like, oh, this is such a weird story. And Tam tells me that's because I'm playing the second game in an unfinished trilogy.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I should clearly go back and play the first game.
That's the decision.
Was a mistake.
The Longest Journey is an absolutely incredible game from a time where that is also the pinnacle of a now dead genre.
Yes.
But like, when you say pinnacle, it was also the most point and click adventure game. The puzzles were the most obtuse. They were so catering to an audience that no longer exists, and the game is basically unplayable as a result now.
Yeah, it was the pinnacle of a mountain built out of madness, but it was a pinnacle.
But
it's from an era when we were willing to put up with things more than we do now.
Think about coming back to an ultra hotbar combat MMO.
Oh yeah.
In 20 years.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, how did anybody play this? This is nonsense. And like, that's exactly what going back and playing The Longest Journey was. It made total perfect sense at the time. Like, honestly, The Longest Journey's puzzles were pretty tame.
This wasn't
Today,
Gabriel Knight 3.
I found out that Gabriel Knight 3 and The Longest Journey came out in the same year.
Yeah, like, people who were... If you were on the internet with people who talked about adventure games when those two games came out, mostly people thought that The Longest Journey was kiddie stuff.
Yeah.
Because the puzzles were amateur, were like grade school level.
Yeah, The Longest Journey had like the inflatable duck thing, and sure, fine, whatever. Gabriel Knight 3 had the cat hair mustache.
The cat hair mustache has become a bit of an infamous thing. Like,
Yeah,
I've never played
like two puzzles.
adventure games of this era, and I know about the cat hair mustache.
It's like that. I mean, and at the time, like it is ludicrous and it sounds ludicrous, but also like you go and playing that game, and like if you've been playing adventure games like in the years leading up to that, you get to that and it's like, oh, this is an adventure
It's like
game
going
puzzle.
back and playing an old arcade game where it cheats and kills you
Yeah.
like clockwork every minute and a half, and you're like, really? And you're supposed to put a quarter in every time you die?
We enjoyed this.
How would you do
We
that?
did.
Like, you like
We did this for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, tastes have changed. Well, okay, so talking about the hotbar combat thing, EverQuest is testing, or EverQuest 2 is testing out a classic server for, EverQuest 2, mostly because they ruined Freeport and Kinos at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an attempt to bring that back. So I played some of that, and mostly like, I still love that world, but Lord, does the combat it's just awful. Like, it's awful.
I mean, it's pre-hotbar combat.
Well, I mean, it's still hotbar combat,
EverQuest
but
2, so not quite.
it's still
about to
hotbar
say,
combat,
EverQuest 2.
but like,
Okay.
but it also is like 3 hotbars worth of buttons that you need to push every so often. Like, it's nonsense. And the other aspect of it is like, it made me realize how good EverQuest was at world building and how kind of bad it was at combat.
I mean, I feel like it's really optimistic to be trying to go back to the heyday when EverQuest 2 was popular.
I mean, it was also a game that never quite really made it because it launched.
It launched at the absolute wrong time.
Like a couple months ahead of World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
It was the game that World of Warcraft made look old.
Yeah, right. Immediately. And almost all of that was the combat. Like, it was almost all combat. Because like the world itself was really cool. Like, Kinos and Freeport were way better towns than anything World of Warcraft ever had.
I think it was also the art direction.
That.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it was trying to look realistic.
And there's a lot less wiggle room available there.
Well, and its art style was set back when I was still playing EverQuest 1. And like, so it did not improve over time. Like, it was.
Also, its timing was in fact worse than you remember. It came out at the start of November, and World of Warcraft came out 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I was beta testing it like in August of that year, and
by the time it came out, everybody had seen what World of Warcraft was doing, and you couldn't buy World of Warcraft if you wanted to.
It came out just early enough before World of Warcraft for our friend Thalen to get into EverQuest 2 and decide he's going to stick with it and be real sad about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a bunch of friends that decided that they were going to go down the EverQuest 2 path because they didn't get everybody liking WoW. And I felt real bad. And like, I played some of it, but it wasn't until I took a break from WoW a year or so into it that I really got into it.
Yeah. Like, I eventually came around and played it for a while, like years later, and it was fun. Like, it was a decent MMO.
It had a great world. Like, that's the thing that really stands out of me, going back and experiencing it again, is it had such a good world. It just did not have a good combat system at all. Not in the least.
And we've talked about way back in 2014 that maybe destroying your world is not the best of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, probably the people who play your game have gotten attached to that world.
Somehow we've managed to blow up Lion's Arch, 3 times at this point?
Once. They blown it up once, and people are still mad
up.
About it.
Yeah, it got blown up real good, but yeah, just the once.
I mean, they've made major renovations to it 3 times, I think. Maybe 4.
But I'm pretty sure at least part of the reason Lion's Arch got blown up was performance issues, which, like, when it's something like that, like, eventually choices have to be made. I don't...
Yeah.
usually it's just like this desire to like make things fresh and new and exciting, and I don't think that's what MMO players want in a game that they've been devoted to for a couple of years. Not in the part of the world that they're used to. They want new parts of the world, and they want those to be fresh and new, exciting. Sure, but like that's the place that I grew up.
I mean,
that's
I'm
where
still
I go back
bitter.
to like feel comfy.
I'm still bitter over Cataclysm.
They drained Loch Modan, and I will never forgive them.
Right, like so
They flooded the Thousand Needles. That's
like,
my never forgive.
and I kind of wonder, like, Cataclysm, while I stuck around as a reanimated corpse in World of Warcraft many times, Cataclysm is the point at which they lost my heart most of the way. Like, I still kept trying to play because I had friends that played it, but like, that was when I left. And similarly, like, I left Destiny initially when they removed several planets.
Yeah, they take parts of your world away, and
like, I never forgave them for either one of those.
That reduces that attachment.
Which is a bummer, because Wrath of the Lich King was definitely the pinnacle for me.
It's also a pity because if you can never change anything, then your game world stagnates.
Yeah.
And like, man, that's hard to deal with.
Yeah. No, I absolutely understand the desire to change things. I think part of it is like things like Cataclysm and Destiny just straight up removing things were going too far. Like adding elements, change. It's, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like a world should change over time.
Change the stuff, but not my
mostly
stuff.
not.
Yeah.
People are mostly not too broken up by the giant hole in the middle of Keswick Hills, which also happened around that time.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody had fond memories of Keswick Hills from before that. I'm sure somebody does, but
anyway, we should probably cut it here because we've gone well over. Anyway, what game betrayed you and frustrated you? Leave us a note on one of the many social media platforms.
To paraphrase Jack Kirby, video games will break your heart, kid.
Yeah. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.